Hello and welcome to the AIM North America Food Supply Chain webinar series. AIM North America is an alliance enabling the cooperation, development, and standardization of AIDC technologies. From barcodes to RFID to IoT, AIM North America is your advocate. Any organization with an interest in data collection is a beneficiary of these efforts. Membership provides an opportunity to influence the direction of the industry, develop policies and standards, access market reports, and engage new partners. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to go over. First is our antitrust policy. That's the policy of AIM Inc. to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. Next, we have AIM North America's collaboration and work product policy. This states that presentations like today's are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM's developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. And lastly, before we get started, attendees are muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question, our presenters will be answering some of those at the end of the presentation. You can ask questions by chatting those to AIM Member Services. You will also be notified when the presentation recording is available. Today, I'm here with two subject matter experts from GS1 US, Liz Sertle, who's the Senior Director of Community Engagement, and Brian Fusitola, the Director of Community Engagement. Today, they will be discussing enabling transparency and efficiencies in the food supply chain with GS1 standards. To start, Brian's going to start by going over GS1 US's antitrust policy. Brian, welcome and take it away.
All right, thank you, Michael. Very much appreciated. Liz and I are very excited to be here with everybody. And before we do get started, very much like we just heard the antitrust policy of AIM North America, GS1 US is also committed to full compliance with antitrust laws. So we are not going to discuss anything that would be considered competitively sensitive. But if anybody does have concerns during the course of our discussion about propriety, please inform us as soon as possible. It's important for us to make you aware that GS1 standards are voluntary and not mandatory, so it's important to make your own business decisions. And if you'd like to review the complete GS1 US antitrust policy, you can do so at the URL link posted at the bottom of this slide. So with that, let's jump into the agenda for today. So we're going to talk about a few different things here. First of all, who is GS1 US? Then we'll talk about the GS1 standards, what they are, how folks are utilizing them within industry. We'll specifically dive into the use of the standards for supply chain transparency, visibility, and efficiencies, and then how to apply the GS1 standards to really see the benefits of food safety and traceability. So let's go ahead and jump in. So who is GS1 US? So many of you may already be familiar with our organization, and for those who may not be, GS1 US is a neutral, not-for-profit organization, and we work with industries to identify and solve problems applying the GS1 standards, or what we often refer to, or you may have heard referred to as the global language of business. The standards help to create a common foundation for businesses by uniquely identifying, accurately capturing, and then automatically sharing vital information about products, locations, and assets. And this really helps to enable visibility throughout the supply chain by exchanging authentic data and empowering businesses to grow and improve efficiencies, safety, security, and sustainability. And it's really interesting that and unique that our position as a neutral organization enables us the role to bring business leaders together in a safe, non-competitive space and engage these industry communities to revolutionize the way they do business by envisioning the future, solving industry problems, and then exemplifying best practices out to industry as a whole. Now, globally, GS1 US, when we look at that by the numbers, globally there are 110 plus member organizations serving about 1.5 million businesses around the world, really providing that framework to assign product identifiers, share information electronically, and enabling the scanning of more than 6 billion barcodes every day. At GS1 US, locally, we serve more than 300,000 businesses here across the United States in 25 industries, through support services, tools, education and training, online forums, and events. Excuse me. We work with industry members to understand what their problems or opportunities for improvement are and what may exist in that particular industry. And we meet with them to talk about the specific opportunities within their supply chains that they're looking to solve for. We align with them on the requirements that it'll take to tackle those specific opportunities. And then we look to determine if there's already maybe a solution in place that the standards provide for. And maybe the need is just to create further education against the current standards and new focus. Or if the standards don't currently meet the need, we work with industry to update the standards or develop a new standard. And then most importantly, through our work, we ensure that organizations have the tools and guidance they need to adopt and implement the standards. So let's dive into a bit about the standards. The GS1 standards I mentioned earlier help trading partners to really speak a common language for doing business and put them in a position to help achieve enhanced transparency, visibility, and efficiencies within their supply chains and with their trading partners. And the foundational standards that help to facilitate these supply chain benefits are broken up into 3 parts: identify, capture, and share. So first, you need to identify products, places, assets, etc. Secondly, you'll capture that information into a barcode or other data carrier. And lastly, that information can then be shared with trading partners. And we're going to walk through identify, capture, and share in the next few slides. But first, to get started with identifying, capturing, and sharing your product and location information, you need a base number. And in our world, or as standards refer to it, that is a GS1 company prefix. And this number is licensed to your company via a local GS1 member organization. So if you remember the 110 plus organizations I referenced before, you'd get this prefix, GS1 company prefix number through one of those organizations. And that base number is going to help create various types of numbers: a GTIN, a GLN, an SSCC, and we're going to get into those more in a bit. But depending on that prefix's capacity, it can allow for the creation of one unique identification number, or if the capacity allows, up to 100,000 unique identification numbers. And so the capacity that you get is really going to be dependent upon the business activities that you're going to look to implement. But the one that you are most familiar with, right, the identification that you're probably most familiar with, is this barcode here. As you see, it crosses point of sale. And the first few numbers in that barcode, or that are underneath that barcode, that's the GS1 company prefix. Now, when you're ready to create those identification numbers, we're going to jump to that next slide and dive in. This is really the first step of creation and facilitation of processes across supply chain, right? And those numbers are used to identify products, things like soda, beer, snacks, water, sunglasses, chargers, really anything you might sell at retail locations. And for those of you using a point of sale system or selling at retail, you're probably most likely using GS1 identifiers already. But you can also identify global location numbers. So while you'd use an identifier to create a GTIN, or global trade item number, for a product, and that's that unique identifier that represents that product, this global location number is going to uniquely identify a place or a physical location or a legal entity such as your company, or even a function within your company. So think like your accounting department or shipping or receiving department. That global location number can help to identify that area within your organization. And many of you may also use a GLN within your EDI transactions as well currently. And this identifier is one that is really, this GLN identifier is really one that is getting a lot of attention recently as it pertains to traceability, visibility, and then even folks that are maybe considering the use of blockchain as a tool for helping provide better supply chain visibility within their organizations. Next, you would talk about capturing data carriers. So you have your identifiers. Now it's time to provide a means by which that information can electronically be captured through the use of a barcode scanner. And so it can be captured in data carriers and really a few different types of data carriers, as you'll see here. Anything from a barcode to an RFID tag, really whatever holds data and is able to be scanned and provide product information, that's what we're talking about when we're referring to a data carrier. The one that you're probably most familiar with is on that left-hand side, that barcode. The EAN UPC barcode there is a barcode that is scanned at point of sale and only carries GTIN information. Below that, we have a data bar, which you may have seen on fresh produce. And again, that is only carrying the GTIN or global trade item number as well. As we move from left to right, we have case level barcodes there. So an ITF 14 is commonly used on cases and in most industries to convey only the GTIN, but those folks within industry that are looking to provide much more information and provide a broader level of supply chain visibility, they might be using what's called a GS1 128 barcode. So not only are you going to be able to share the GTIN, but you'll be able to share date information or batch lot. And again, that's going to help you be able to track that product across the supply chain as that data carrier gets scanned. From a pallet level data carrier perspective, you might use a serial shipping container code to do that. And then you'll notice that there's RFID tags as well. And it's important to note that this technology is really making a comeback. So folks that have maybe dabbled in it in retail are starting to kind of re-energize and reevaluate its use from a transparency, inventory transparency standpoint or visibility standpoint within supply chain. And food service is really seeing an uptick in interest as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And then once you have those identifiers created, you're in a position to capture. Now you got to share this information with your trading partners across the supply chain. And so the GS1 standards set a framework that helps to facilitate the flow of product information through the supply chain. So I'm going to go through quickly each of these. So the Global Data Synchronization Network, or GDSN, is where you share product information, things like weights, dimension, hierarchy structure to get the product through the supply chain. Or to sell the product, you might be sharing marketing data, nutritionals, or allergen information if your products contain those. From an EDI standpoint, EDI is typically used for transactional data, things like sharing of purchase orders, billing or invoicing. And then industries like the apparel and general merchandise industry also share product information through EDI catalogs for their products. And then lastly, EPCIS. EPCIS provides a framework to share physical event data, and that can help track the movement of products across the supply chain and provide better visibility. So those are the foundational standards that help to facilitate processes and potential benefits. We're going to dive in now, and I'm going to turn it over to Liz to take us through the use of the standards for supply chain transparency, visibility, and efficiency.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And you heard Brian talk about a strong foundation and speaking the same language. Having that strong foundation can really help the supply chain have more transparency. And also, as we're sitting here in a very unique position from a business perspective, we can potentially have a more agile supply chain, be able to move products from potentially food service to retail more quickly, et cetera. So as we're talking about supply chain transparency, visibility, efficiencies, food safety, there's a lot to be said about speaking that same language and making sure that we're using standards. Some of the benefits that we see for organizations are pretty basic, right? But this is a huge undertaking and a huge benefit that you can see. So when you've got collaboration, you can move that business forward together. Whether it's from a transparency perspective, when you can much more easily and precisely be able to get bad food out of the supply chain. You're going to be lowering those recall costs and potentially, and I'll talk to this a little bit later, we won't have those product category killers as they're called, so that you can much more easily see exactly where something is at that point in time you need to find it in the supply chain. Business process efficiencies, when you have better order quality, you have better accuracy in inventory. If suppliers are using an EDI ASN, which is an advanced ship notice, to tell somebody what's coming, then that warehouse knows to expect it, and the check-in process is much more efficient and quick, so that you don't have somebody at the back door physically counting each case as it's delivered. Just taking that very simple time out of the supply chain can put those folks back into a value add position. And when we think about the enriched product information for consumers, where we are today is so e-commerce focused. I mean, as we're sitting in our homes, not necessarily going to grocery stores like we were before, we're dependent on that information transparency. We have a huge need for trust in that information and having good quality data. Speaking that same language so all of the systems can use it is so very important. And to hit on again, this is a linear supply chain. We know that the supply chain isn't linear, but having unique identifications for both products and locations, because we see products go from manufacturer to distributor to DC to the retailer or operator and ultimately to the consumer. And when that happens, speaking that same language when we get into the non-linear supply chain gives us the ability to see where a product is through the life cycle of that process, because we know that it's not linear. We know that there's trucks and boats and planes and rail that are taking products to one space or another, and we want to make sure that we have visibility to that information. So when something happens at the store, is this product recalled? Oh my gosh, there's an issue with product X, and we need to know if that product is recalled. At your fingertips, you could very easily know who is the brand owner. And then where was this product manufactured? And then we would know, yes, this is a problem product. This is not a problem product. We can keep it on our shelves and let our consumers know that it's safe, or we need to remove it from the shelves. So having the ability to speak the same language all the way from a grower or manufacturer to a store or a food service operator and ultimately the consumer is very, very powerful. And really, a lot of these standards are being used today. So it's leveraging the standard, not just for products to make the register go beep, like Brian was saying with the barcode, with that UPCA barcode, but it's also utilizing the standards and advancing that from a location perspective and sharing that information. So when we talk about visibility and traceability, having that foundational standard, having that exchange of data is super important. And then accurately answering, and so when you think about that more complex supply chain, who, what was it, when did it happen, and where did it happen, can really get down to the standard of traceability. Critical tracking events and key data elements are something you may be familiar with. This is not a GS1 defined terminology set. This was industry defined. But basically what visibility data is it consists of events where each of the, where it records each of the product movements or something that happened throughout the supply chain and doing that accurately as it happens through the real world. So a critical tracking event, they're called transforms. So you create something, you transport it, you move it, you receive it, you deplete it or sell it, or you deplete it and because something's unsaleable, you destroy it. So the key data elements that go along with these CTEs answer those questions, right? So it's the data that you're capturing that's essential about the time and the place and the party of the event or of the idea of the product. This is the epitome of speaking that same language all across the supply chain so that you can very easily excise that information and get what you need out of it so that you're not using spreadsheets and emails and going back and forth, etc. This is what you're seeing here is kind of the backbone of an EPCIS event, which Brian spoke to previously in that share, also can be used to help with blockchain. So this is a very easily, I think, understandable slide, but can get very complex if you want it to. So next, I'd like to walk through a real life example of following a food supply chain, where a retailer or restaurant places an order with the supplier. The supplier ships that information and they encode that GTIN, that global trade item number, in that 128 barcode, which Brian spoke about, which also can have a batch lot, it can have date. So it's capturing that very specific information about those meatballs in this instance throughout its trip to the store. So you have a manufacturing plan, it goes to the plant, and then the cases are assembled, all of those individual cases are assembled on a pallet, and an SSCC code is encoded on that 128 label. An advanced ship notice is sent so that they know what to expect. That DC knows that it's expecting X number of cases on the pallet of meatballs. That really helps with inventory and receiving accuracy. So that distribution center in pink on the bottom, it takes that shipment, it breaks it up appropriately. It's identifying now the GLN, or the location number of that DC, as well as where it is going. So it will know that it's going to 5 different locations, et cetera, and it will record exactly where those locations are. And ultimately, when it gets to that store or restaurant, that item with the GTIN and associated information will be scanned to the restaurant with the GLN, which means if there's anything wrong, potentially, they would be able to say very easily where that was. So you'll have, and in this example, within about 2 hours, you were able to find 9 cases of product with issue, and then within 4 hours you found everything. So this is really, it walks through very easily what can happen when you're leveraging those standards. And when we talk about leveraging the standards, one of the things that we feel very strongly about at GS1 US is partnerships with other associations so that we are encouraging other associations members, such as AIM, to be involved with and join the discussion about the standards. Because, for instance, when we talk about the Produce Traceability Initiative and produce, PMA, United Fresh, and CPMA from a Canadian perspective are very much the experts in produce, but we come together for the produce industry with that lens, using the GS1 standards to really move it forward, to come together from a supply side, from a buy side, so that we're all working together for the better of that industry. We do have public-private partnerships with the USDA for the USDA Branded Foods Product Database. We work with Institute of Food Technologists, Meat Messaging, which is imports of, there's a pilot going on now with imports of red meat from Australia, and then Ag Gateway as well. This is just a very small list of who we work with, but just wanted also for you all to be aware that it's kind of a broad brush of who we talk to make sure that the standards are being used. So next, Brian is going to bring this all together in how we move forward with GS1 standards.
Thanks, Liz. So as we shared today, trusted data and unique identification are really the backbone and the foundation that are going to help meet several business needs and demands, both internally and then out in the marketplace. And so as we've shared, right, they will help to facilitate transaction efficiencies. So things like order to cash processes or ordering and invoicing within the supply chain. They'll help cover off on regulatory demands. So various regulatory spaces within your industry might have specific demands that you need to meet. Standards can help provide the framework by which to do that. Visibility, understanding where your product is across the supply chain. This has never been more important and will continue to be even more important as we continue to move into this new normal with supply chain. So that visibility is going to be key. Supply chain and logistics efficiencies. Within every supply chain, organizations are looking to understand how they can maximize their processes to eliminate inefficiencies and really increase that bottom line. So anything from efficient receipt of products, stacking and tracking of inventory, truckload optimization, those are all things that can help be facilitated within the supply chain and help ensure the right product in the right place at the right time at a fair cost of doing business. And moreover, and last but not least, information accuracy. This is going to be essential. Making sure you have accurate and complete information is going to help you meet those transactional, regulatory, visibility, and supply chain efficiency goals. So as we look towards future capabilities, as we move forward, for example, blockchain on this next slide, the GS1 standards are going to really help ensure the foundational capabilities that need to be in place within your organization for the use of a distributed ledger technology, whether that's blockchain or another tool that you might find fits best for your organization. So the standards of identification, capturing, and sharing information are very much in play with a technology like blockchain. And at GS1 US, we actually have a cross-industry discussion group that's been working to align on the foundational GS1 standards that will be necessary to put in place to successfully utilize such a technology. If you are interested in participating in that cross-industry blockchain discussion group, please reach out, and Liz and I can help you get set up in that capacity. So what do we have in the way of resources and tools and guidance that can help your organization forge forward within your GS1 standards journey? Well, in order to help understand how to uniquely identify products, capture information, and share all this important information with trading partners, we have education and training available on our GS1 US University site. And the education and training offerings are going to consist of free and paid certificate courses, workshops, live education webinars, very similar to what you're listening to today. And for information specific to supply chain visibility, we actually have a page that can be accessed at gs1us.org/visibility. And as always, if you have any questions as you continue along your standard journey, please reach out to Liz or me or anyone on our GS1 US team, and we'd be happy to provide clarity or point you in the right direction to tools and resources that can help solve your business needs. So with that, I think we'd like to open it up to questions.
All right. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Liz, for the information. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the questions if you guys are ready.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, great. First question we have is, with the pandemic, have you seen an increase in interest in traceability implementation? If so, has it been in certain markets?
So I think when we talk about the pandemic, there is absolutely a conversation going on about traceability standards and implementation, and the very meaningful way that GS1 standards can do that. I think that that's really all of where GS1 US works. So if you think about healthcare, making sure that all of those standards are put in place in that segment, as well as food service and retail grocery, because as we know, food service really is struggling right now, and being able to move those products into the retail grocery space, having more visibility to know what's in inventory, et cetera, would be very helpful.
Yeah, just to add a point of clarity to that, right? So as Liz said, we're having a lot of conversations with industry members about shifting their supply chains to still meet consumer demands in light of this, in light of the pandemic and this new normal. So what we always revert back to in those discussions is just a refresher on the foundational standards for identification, capturing that information, and then sharing accurate and complete information across trading partners, because that's really what's going to set the foundation to, come out on the other side of this pandemic either unscathed or in some cases even better maybe than when you entered it. So I would just add that.
Okay, great. Another question we received is, have you had issues getting all parties to work together, like a shipper and supplier, to provide interoperability? And who in the supply chain takes the lead in implementation?
So I can start with that one. So from a collaboration standpoint, I would say that's one of the key pillars to the use of GS1 standards within the supply chain, is everybody being on board with the need to collaborate and keep open lines of communication, right, among trading partners. And so, as we alluded to with kind of this new normal and this pandemic situation, we're seeing collaboration at higher rates than maybe even ever before. As Liz alluded to, food service trading partners are having to repurpose demand for products that were made specifically for food service and make them retail ready. That takes collaboration with the distribution partners, takes collaboration with retailers to understand their requirements and then meet those needs. And then also making sure that they're covering off on the base demand for restaurants that may have shifted their operations to still meet consumer needs. So collaboration is at a heightened level. It was even before this pandemic hit. And to that end, GS1 US, we provide a framework for that to take place within our GS1 US industry initiatives. We have work groups where industry members, manufacturers, distributors, operators, solution providers join monthly calls and talk about things like product information and images or supply chain visibility, and really align on those key tenets for being successful with that and how they're going to collectively move forward as an industry to implement and adopt.
Okay, great. Another question we received is, do you have to register with GS1 to follow and use GS1 standards?
So no, you absolutely do not have to register with GS1 to use the standards. They're open for anybody to use. If you want to be involved with the GS1 US work groups, then you would be joining initiatives, et cetera. But no, absolutely not. You do not have to register with GS1 to use the standards.
Okay, great. And can different data be stored? Like produce and meats in a supply chain may have different temperature requirements that should be known throughout the chain.
So this is a great question. In the GS1 128 barcode, there can be different information stored on that barcode dependent on what category of food or product that you are that you're using. There's application identifiers that can tell you what information, whether it's lot batch, whether it's date, it can get down to the date format. One of the things that we know is being talked to right now is the example that was just brought up with different temperature requirements. So this is, from a barcode perspective, it's a little bit more static information, batch lot. To get down to either a cereal or something like that, it's a little bit more difficult and complex. Serialization is absolutely possible. We're not seeing that as much. But when we talk about blockchain, distributed ledgers, et cetera, that is one of the asks from the industry that we're seeing as something like temperature control. So stay tuned on that one.
Okay, great. Another question we received is, are you seeing parts of the food industry asking for individual item serialization rather than batch lot level? And if so, which part of the food industry is asking for this?
So I would say go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so from a food standpoint, there may be some recipients that are asking for the serialization. We largely see batch lot utilized as being shared through the GS1 128 barcode, as that really kind of provides some granularity in terms of getting back to maybe the line and the shift within that facility where the product is produced. But I think we do see some serialization, but by and large across categories within the food space, batch lot is predominantly what we see most of. And Liz, any other perspective you'd add to that?
No, I totally agree.
Okay, great. Before we go, one last question, and I know that there's other questions that have come in. We'll be getting back to those individuals post-webinar. I'll send those both to Liz and Brian. Is there a place for people to find case studies that GS1 has done? Yes, absolutely. And I failed to mention that as part of our GS1 US website. If you go into any one of those, there's a part on the ribbon where you can click down to a specific industry. You can choose retail, grocery, healthcare, food service, apparel, general merchandise. Within those specific industry pages, you'll see highlighted some case studies that industry members have taken the time to share their stories
and success stories of achieving ROI with the standards. You can find those there. We also have a resource library on the website where you'll find even more case studies that may have happened over the years. So absolutely have those on the website, leverage those, learn from those. And if you have any questions, please reach out and we can help provide some clarity about how you can take those same learnings and potentially implement for your organization.
Great, thank you for that, Brian. And thank you both Brian and Liz for your time and the information you provided today. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I also like to
Thank
thank
you.
the audience for their active participation today. We will let you know when this webinar is available to download the recording of it. And thank you and have a great rest of your day.